What's up, Wild Mamas and friends? Welcome back to Wild Mama TV. I'm Tiff, and I'm so grateful and happy and excited to be doing part 4 in this 4-part series around how I joined a cult at 16 years old, had an arranged marriage by 20 years old, and then became a mama at 22, and all of the things that came after that, which you started to hear in part 3, which was crazy. And so today I'm so excited to finally get to like the healing part of all of this, because it was like year after year after year, trauma after trauma after trauma, pain after pain after pain, and I almost didn't make it. But I did make it, which is why I'm here. And so if you want to hear about how I healed and how I made it through and how I came to a place of love and joy and myself, then definitely keep on watching. All right, y'all, so I'm just gonna get right to it. So yes, I did heal. But before I got to healing, I had to kind of go through one last bad experience that kind of got me to my breaking point, where I finally took some action that actually really helped me and basically changed my life. So what had happened was the same professor and mentor who I took that class from way back in the day, who, facilitated doing my ideal day, etc., ended up creating a business, and I ended up working for her because one of my big driving forces and goals that kind of kept me motivated in all of this was to get debt free and to pay off all my debt by 30 years old. However, I was like 27 and I still hadn't even ever had a real job or like a full-time job, because after I went to Mexico, as I told you, remember I went to Mexico, Ruben and I realized our relationship didn't make sense anymore. So we decided to separate, eventually got divorced. After that, I then went to Mexico again, but I went to Baja California Sur, and I ended up doing a program for 2.5 months, backpacking, sea kayaking, and sailing with the National Outdoor Leadership School, NOLS. And that experience was transformative for me, and so amazing, and really exposed me to the need for nature that I had, even though I was born in California, but I lived in Chicago for so long that I had got totally disconnected from nature. But I felt so good being out in nature. No Facebook, no social media, unfortunately no contact with my kids either, but it was the time that I needed away from everything and to heal. And that was actually where I was able to really mourn the loss of my mom, because I just had quiet time, and that was really helpful for me. When I came back though, I didn't have a job, I didn't have no place to live, I was no longer married, so I didn't really know what to do. So I ended up becoming a bartender for probably like a year, but then it got to being 27-ish, and I'm like, shit, my goal is to pay off my debt by 30. There's no way I'm gonna pay off all this debt if I stay a bartender. At least the bar I was at, I was not gonna pay off $35,000 in debt by 30. So what I ended up doing was I ended up going back to my high school, where all this craziness started, I went back there and I got like a simple admin job. And then after working there a few months, they promoted me and I got my first salary job, paid me $41,000, and I became the community service director and the assistant dean of discipline. It was all right. Wasn't my favorite job ever. But it started to get me to a place where I started making more money to be able to pay off this debt. But then it got to like towards the end of the year, and it wasn't resonating with me anymore. One, it wasn't getting me to my goals fast enough, and two, I just didn't feel totally aligned on a values perspective. And so that's when I ended up reconnecting with my old mentor, who ended up starting a business. And then she hired me, and what I thought was so ideal was that it was a virtual company. It would allow me to work from home. I could have my kids home, when they're with me, etc. I felt like it was my ideal dream job, working with one of my favorite people in the world, someone who was like me, someone who inspired me, etc. And so I ended up quitting my job at the school to take this job with my mentor. And after 3 months of working with her, I got promoted again to director of operations, which I had never studied business. I never studied operations. I didn't even know that that was a job that you could have, but I guess I was really good at it, which I am. And so I became the director of operations for the first time. So then money's starting to roll in. So I'm explaining this, but okay. There's like multiple things happening at the same time. The job stuff seems like it's going really well. I'm still having the inner turmoil everywhere else, right? So there's layers to all of this. And some of the depression I felt was still happening while I was in this job, making the most money that I had ever made in my life. Okay, so just had to explain that. So I was making money and I was paying off my debt, etc. But then, and even probably from the start of taking that job, my mentor and I really just weren't aligning, and we had differing approaches to things, and the work environment wasn't one that served me, and I became so stressed out. I became so anxious and fearful that I was gonna get in trouble, fearful that I was gonna get attacked, fearful of like what was gonna happen if I didn't do like the right perfect thing in the job. It just was like, it was a toxic work environment for me, and I didn't thrive. Even though I was making the most money, I thought working with my ideal mentor person would be great, but it actually ended up being really unhealthy. There was a lot of great things that I learned, and a lot of benefits, but overall it just wasn't working for me. So that January was the first time, I think this was 2014 maybe, the January of 2014, I made a vision board for the first time in my life. So I had my ideal day when I was 23. I made my ideal day. Then I got to 2014, I was 29. No, I was 28 when I made my vision board, and then I turned 29. So I made my first vision board, and something about creating the visual piece of like the things inside of me, like all of that ideal day stuff that was in there, came out in my vision board, and I was so incredibly amazed and inspired by it. And I ended up making like one or two more after that, because I just like needed to express myself. But a lot of what I ended up having on my board was stuff that really spoke to my soul, stuff that really spoke to like what I really wanted. And one of the phrases I remember was on there was something about like, you know, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's learning to move through it. And at that time in my life, I struggled with a lot of fear around a lot of things. So I made that vision board, and I started to realize, you know, over the next couple of months that, you know what, if I want to actualize what's on this board and really be one with myself and really find the peace, the inner peace that I want, and create the life that I want, I don't believe that being in such a toxic and stressful work environment is going to serve me. And I also started to realize patterns. I hadn't fully recognized patterns totally in my own life yet. I think as you get older as a person, you start to realize the patterns that show up in your life. And so I was starting to realize patterns, especially in my relationship with my mentor. And it was eerily similar to relationships I had in the church. And then when I went further back, it was eerily similar to relationship I had with my sister, and to my dad, like to the places where I had a lot of trauma in my childhood. And so I started to see these things, and you know, yes, a lot of different people did a lot of different things to me over time, but I started to realize, I don't know if I was using these words yet, but I started to realize that, oh, I may not be responsible for the wounds inflicted upon me in my life, but I am responsible for whether or not they stay open. So remember in the last video, I talked about feeling like a victim, that like whatever I would do, I felt like I kept getting knocked down, that no matter how much I wanted my dreams to come true, that life just wasn't going to work out for me. Like that's how I genuinely felt at that time. And I carried that with me until these like moments that I'm talking to you about right now. So yeah, I felt a lot of like kind of blame on other people, like, oh, they're doing this to me, or oh, you know, this person's wrong, etc. But as I started to recognize these patterns showing up, and being frustrated by them, like, why do I keep playing small? Why do I keep putting people up on a pedestal in hopes that they will like me, in hopes that they will see my greatness, and then put me on a pedestal? I kept doing that, and yet I would always end up getting walked on. Instead of lifted up, I would get walked on and abused. And I was so frustrated by that. I didn't understand why that was happening. I didn't understand why I kept getting stuck in these patterns where I'm in relationships that I think are going to be good and healthy, but then they end up being really unhealthy and toxic. And I was just sick of it. I was like, yo, something's got to change. And another motivation that I had was that by the time I'm 30, I don't want to be carrying around all this baggage. Like, I knew I had baggage. I didn't necessarily know all of what it was. I didn't necessarily know what to do with it, but I knew that I had baggage. And I knew that I didn't want to go into my 30s with all of that baggage. So I came to like this reckoning moment, I guess, where it was like, okay, all of these things have happened. All of this shit has happened. And much of it I didn't have control over. A lot of it wasn't something that I necessarily chose or could give consent to. And there were just a lot of the circumstances of my life. However, if I just respond to the circumstances of my life as a victim, the person that continues to suffer is me. Like, I'm the one that keeps suffering, and I'm the one that keeps missing out on joy and love and happiness, and I'm the one stuck in the cycle. I'm the one like feeling like I'm being pummeled around in a dryer or some shit. And it just doesn't feel good. Like it's hell, right? Like it's hell, it's torture. I'm miserable, I'm depressed, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm sad, like all of the things. So it just wasn't serving me being a victim, but I didn't know what my other options were. And so I decided that something had to change. And what I realized in noticing the patterns was, well, yes, a lot of these people did a lot of these things, but the common denominator in all of these situations is moi. It's me. As much as that might hurt to say, or as much as, you know, that sucks to admit, I'm the one that's in all of these situations. So I came to a point of like, okay, well, I can't change anybody else. I've tried, it doesn't work. And so I guess I should probably work on changing myself. And so that's what I decided. And I got to a point in my job where it just got worse. And my boss actually, after a retreat, made me, because I had, okay, so at this job, I ended up hiring both Ruben and David. So I haven't talked much about David in this 4-part series, but he's the person that I met in 2011 when I was 26 years old, months after I got back from Mexico, and, you know, I wasn't with Ruben anymore. So David came into the picture. Excuse me. And so when I had this job, 2014, I had hired Ruben and David to work in the company and in this team that I was building. And it was awesome, and we were all working really well together. But at a retreat, for some reason, David really like triggered my boss, and she accused him of being toxic. Not to his face, but accused him of being toxic, and had me fire him. And she told me that I needed to take my relationship hat off and put my director of operations hat on and fire him and let him know that we're no longer having that position. Which for me was just like, wait, what? Like, you're asking me to not give a damn about my partner, someone I love, my family, someone who's in my home, who I live with every day. You're asking me to fire them, not say why, and have no humanity in the process. Like, to just put my director of operations hat on and fire him. Like, who the fuck says that? like who says that? And I think it made me feel a lot like in the church when there was just no humanity, there was no consideration or concern for the true well-being of a person. It was all for their own gain or our gain as a church. But it wasn't out of genuine love and care for this person. So I was like kind of at this moment again, and I had already been wrestling with being in the company. I didn't like it. I wasn't sure if I should stay or go. I was having all these deep realizations of like, I gotta figure out my shit. I need to change my life. I need to take responsibility, yada, yada, yada. And then I had this situation where, you know, I'm being asked to fire my partner who's literally in the next room, who's being accused of being toxic, even though he's like the most kind person I have ever met, and the most gentle person. It just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. And so I was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm not firing him. I'm gonna quit. And I'm going to resign. And so yeah, it all just kind of culminated to a head, and I put in my resignation letter. Like, I was told to fire him on Monday, and I quit on Friday. And unfortunately, at that time, my boss was actually in the hospital. And another thing that kind of like irked me and made me submit my resignation letter was that she texted me really mad that I did not reach out to her and ask how she was doing in the hospital. But I was pissed that I was being asked to fire my partner and no one gave a shit how that might make me feel or what that might do to our family, our financial situation. None of the above got considered, yet I'm supposed to ask how you're doing. So I think I just like was like, no more. I'm not going to be in relationships like this anymore. I'm not going to be treated like this anymore. I'm not going to put myself in situations where I end up, being asked to do fucked up things. And where the humanity of people is not being considered. My humanity is not being considered. My feelings are not being considered. So I resigned out that bitch. And literally, like, right after I resigned, I tried to find a therapist. And I was like, you know what? I have no plan. I don't have very much money. I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do. But I'm leaving this job and I'm going to therapy. And that's what I did. I went to therapy. And I went actually for 2 times a week for months. And I cried and cried and cried and cried and cried so much. I released all the things I had been holding. And the decision and the promise that I made to myself in starting this journey was that I was going to reconcile the last 29 years of my life. And that I was going to face my own deep self-hatred. That I was not going to carry all of this baggage into my 30s. So that was a huge, huge promise to myself, and I took it very, very seriously. And even though I had no clue how I was going to pay the bills, I did know that I was going to reconcile my life. I was going to reconcile the last 29 years of my life and not take all this baggage into my 30s. And so that's what I did. And I did a ton of therapy, twice a week, and then eventually once a month until it was done. And one realization that really, really kind of helped me have empathy for myself and see myself differently since leaving the church was that I was in this moment in therapy. And I forget exactly what I was saying, but I was sort of talking about like that same story in my head of like, how could I be so dumb to go to that church? Like, even all these years later, I left at 29, I left at 23, I was 29 around this time. It was 6 years later, and I was still feeling shame and embarrassment and guilt around joining the church. And I couldn't love myself. I couldn't have empathy for myself. And so my therapist was just like, Tiff, you're 16 years old, 17 years old. Your dad is in prison. Your mother was literally dying. Your sister had traumatic brain injury and all the other things. And out of all the things you could have decided to do, of all the things that lots of people in my family have done, right? Like drink, smoke, get pregnant, while out, all the things, like all the things I could have done. I decided to go to church. Like that. That's it. And in that moment when she said that, I was like, oh. Oh. Wow. You're right. And actually, that was the first time that I even thought about the fact that over the course of those 9 years when my mom was sick, that actually, yeah, for 9 years she was dying. And I hadn't put those things together. I was just thinking, well, I should be strong. I should be okay. I should be able to succeed in my life. Why would I make a dumbass decision like that? You know, all of those things. But that was the first time that I saw my 16 or 17-year-old self. It was the first time I saw Tiff, young Tiff, and I realized in that moment what she had been going through, and just how difficult life was, and that those moments were. And it was the first time that I was able to have empathy for myself and for my younger self, and realize that considering all the options, deciding to go to church was a very innocent decision that I never could have known would lead to what it led to. I didn't go to that church looking to have an arranged marriage, to become a mom, all of the things. I was looking for direction. I was looking for love. I was looking for someone to show me what to do. So that was a very, very, very healing moment for me. And through therapy, I really learned how to prioritize self-authorization over external authorization. So a lot of the patterns that I saw was that I was way back with my sister trying to get love and attention, trying to be accepted. And so in trying to be accepted, I had to kind of diminish myself. And there was a moment when I was a kid when my sister looked at me and she's like, I got sloppy seconds, even though I'm the first child. And it was like statements like that all the time. Like, she was darker than me. She felt like she was more ugly, even though she was the firstborn. And so she projected a lot of stuff onto me as I was growing up that made me feel like it's not okay for me to look how I look. I need to diminish myself in order not to make other people feel uncomfortable, because I want to be accepted. I want them to know that I love them. And that was a pattern that I continued to play out in my life over and over and over again. And it didn't help that my dad was in prison, not around. And when you're young, you don't interpret the systemic things that are causing, black men to go to jail. You're thinking, oh, my dad doesn't love me enough to make good decisions to be around in my life. Something must be wrong with me. That's what you're thinking when you're a child and your dad is making certain choices and not around and going in and out of prison for your entire life and not present. So that wasn't helpful for me at all. So I already had all of that trauma. So it was just these realizations that I was having, that I had been playing these patterns out due to childhood traumas that I had that were then repeating in my adulthood. But I got to a point where I was no longer okay with these things repeating, and that even if other people don't want to act right, and other people don't want to align themselves to integrity, and other people, don't want to treat me or others with love and respect, that's okay. Y'all could do what you want to do. But I need to make better choices, and I need to change how I operate in this world, and I need to make sure that I am right with me and my values and live in integrity within myself. And so that means in order to do that, I gotta own my shit. and I can't be waiting for everybody else to come and save me. So I was always looking for a savior. I was always looking for something outside of myself to give me some power, to see my greatness, to create a pedestal for me. I was always wishing and hoping and dreaming, but never taking full responsibility for my life and never focusing on the things that I can control. So another thing that my therapist really helped me with was she always reminded me, Tiff, stay on your side of the net. And, you know, as I'm talking to her, I'm like, what the fuck is staying on your side of the net? Like, what does that even mean? But she was always just like, stay on your side of the net, stay on your side of the net. And eventually I learned, it was like, oh, I got to focus on what I can control, not on what I can't control. Because I would tend to get really lost in focusing on like things I couldn't control, assuming things, right? Like, oh, I can't send this email because if I send this email, then this person might say this. And if they say this, then this is what's going to happen to me. And I just went on and on and on and on. And then I would just get stuck. And so I was constantly like focusing on the things that I couldn't control. And so I remained powerless all the time. And felt like a victim, felt like everything was against me. So once I really started to like own my shit and face my reality and take control over the things that I can control, and learn to not ignore the signs when things, you know, aren't right or aren't working. So I had to learn how to own up, and I had to learn how to take full responsibility for my life. And when I started to do that, it's not that everything got easier, but it was that I was able to own what I could control, and start to really change my life. And that was all very healing. It was all a very healing process for me. And there were some core things that I learned to really help me build self-awareness, because I believe that self-awareness is one of the very key fundamental things to healing, because you can't heal if you're not aware of your own patterns and the dynamics that are at play within yourself. So I really gained a deeper level of self-awareness through journaling a lot and reflecting often. I got clear on my values, like what my core values were, and centered my life around aligning myself to my values. And I still had my ideal day, I had my vision boards, and so I started to align my actions and the things that I wanted, or the things I wanted to do, to my ultimate goals, my visions, my dreams, and my ideal day. And so it was a long journey, right? Like from 29 to now 34 years old. It's still been the last 5 years that I feel like I've really been able to truly heal and put into practice the things that I learned in therapy. And I don't do therapy anymore right now, because I really learned a lot of the tools that I needed. Because I think a key to therapy is not just going to therapy and talking about things, but you have to take action. Like you have to experiment with the tools that you're given in order to actually heal. So I just want to say that this is why I'm here now. And I went through all of that shit, but I made it through, and I got to this point where I was able to really truly heal and come to a place of like deep self-love and self-care, and self-trust. And it's been amazing. And so everything that I do now, whether in business or whether in Wild Mama and the Mama Master Plan program, I'm teaching the things that I have learned about healing and about actualizing your potential and about living in alignment with your true deepest desires. And yeah, that's my purpose. And my purpose has become more clear over the years, which is to help others come back to themselves as I come back to myself. So I always prioritize my healing and my work so that I can then help others be on that journey as well. So this is the end of part 4. Y'all are troopers for following along with this series, and I so appreciate you supporting me. And now that this series is over, what I want to start to get into is deeper teaching about all of these things that I learned, right? So it's impossible for me to go into the depth of everything I've learned in the last, 34 years of my life, but also especially the last 5 and 10 years of this healing process that I've been on. And so my whole channel is going to be dedicated to teaching those things, showing you how to, align yourself to your values, how to identify your values, how to know what your vision is, how to identify your whole self, how to face your reality. And then also like practical topics like co-parenting. I didn't get into having to learn how to co-parent, but it is a big part of my life now that I have been divorced. So co-parenting and just navigating motherhood in a way that is empowering versus disempowering. And that's my whole goal with all of this and my whole mission with Wow Mama. And so, yeah, I'm so stoked to keep making videos and sharing with y'all. And I do appreciate y'all engaging with me so far. So here's to your healing, and here's to mine, and here's to us as wild mamas, living into our fullest potential, finding our joy, being in our power, breaking through old patterns and cycles so that we can create radical possibility in our lives, which is what we want. So thank you, Wow Mamas. Thank you to my friends and family, and I look forward to seeing y'all in the next video. And if you have questions about any of these part 4 series, like, put them below. Maybe I'll create a bonus video. If you think I should make a bonus video, let me know below. Don't forget to subscribe. And yeah, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.